Good evening. I see a lot of new faces here, which is always very welcome. It takes music to bring you here, but you're all very welcome tonight. My name is Hashim Sarkis. I'm the Aga Khan professor here at the GSD, and I'm very pleased to host tonight's event on behalf of the Aga Khan programs for Islamic architecture at Harvard and at MIT, and also on behalf of the Graduate School of Design. Let me first thank Dean Mohsen Mustafavi and Fairouz Nishanova for initiating this event, and start by welcoming Fairouz back to the GSD. Fairouz Nishanova is a cultural development specialist with a lifelong love of performing arts, music and dance, that embraces the many styles and traditions of the lands where she has lived, and she's lived in quite a few. Born in Sri Lanka to Uzbeki parents, she grew up in Amman, Jordan, and studied economics and international relations at Moscow State University and the London School of Economics and Political Science at LSE. She also told me backstage that she's been several times to Damascus, Aleppo, and has partied in Beirut. After working at the United Nations, she joined the Aga Khan Trust for Culture, where since 2005, she has served as director for the Music Initiative, which is based in Geneva, Switzerland. The event tonight is very much part of the outcome of the Music Initiative's long and enduring work. Hosting the Aga Khan Music Initiative has become something of a tradition of untraditional events. Every other blue moon, Fairouz Nishanova and traveling troubadours from the initiative descend on Boston with their time capsule instruments and contemporary renditions, and they engage us all in a performance or a conversation, or as in tonight, in both. Rendition, space travel, time travel, all would seem to be the most opposed practices to recovery and conservation of musical traditions in the Islamic world, which are the main missions of the initiative. Yet, a closer examination of the activities of the initiative reveals how the focus on the travel of instruments, on cultural networks of exchange, like the Silk Road, on the musicians as agents of change and democracy, and on music as a window, for example, for Central Asia onto the contemporary world. All of these highlight a significant shift in the definition of culture. The iterative aspects of performance, the transcendent dimensions of time and space travel, and the loose boundaries of exchange turn out to be constitutive of culture, not compromised by it. Beyond their interrogation of culture through its conservation, the initiative has also been amazingly successful at combining the challenges of recovery and conservation with the ambitions of development and education. To all of these goals, we aspire here at the Aga Khan programs at Harvard and MIT. Displaced as we are, or are we, in North America, we at the Aga Khan program have thrived on similar pursuits of similar cultural mobilities. Whether studying water and its cultural expressions and receptions with Jim Westcott, the exchanges of artifacts across the Mediterranean with Guru Neshipolu, the mobile miniatures with David Roxborough, Orientalism with Nasser Abad, the lessons of modernity in the Muslim world with Sibel Bozdogan, the Kumbala and its lessons to the modern metropolis with Rahul Mehrotra, or with the impact of geography on contemporary design with yours truly. We all delight in exchange, in agency, in mobility, and in performance. And through the platforms that we have created, like journals such as Muqarnas and New Geographies, we promote the role of Islamic architecture as host to a plurality of cultural traditions and agents. These are the values that we aspire to share with you, Fairouz, and to achieve as much as you have in such a short time, and with the Aga Khan network at large. For these values, but for your wonderful presence here, we would like to welcome you again back to the GSD.
I've been told very strictly not to touch anything on stage because none of us really matter. People who really matter are the artists who will come onto the stage very, very soon. So it really doesn't matter what I say or where I sit, but I have very strict instructions not to touch the mics. Am I okay? Yes, right. What a glowing introduction. Thank you so much, Hashim. I will definitely come back very often. Because we never really, we're known, you know, Aga Khan Development Network is known collectively in the development world as the bricks and mortar brigade, because we never talk, we never give interviews, we never make presentations about what we do. We just get into the field, and we work in 39 countries worldwide, and all of those 39 countries are in the developing world. They are all over East, Central, and South Asia, North Africa, Middle East, and our headquarters and the fundraising offices are located in Europe and in North America. And those are the offices that are permanently empty. If you walk into those beautiful buildings we have, you will find human resources and financial departments and a row of empty offices, because all of us are very, very happy and addicted to what we do in the field, which is what our work is all about. And it is amazing to be able to share just a little glimpse of this work with the audience that is as diverse, as vibrant, and as understanding as you are. So thank you very much for coming on Friday night. I know this is not the, this is the night when probably you want to get off campus and not back into the auditorium. So we will try and make it up to you by making this as vibrant, as entertaining as we possibly can. I would like to introduce my fellow panelists, and it's my great pleasure to welcome to this stage, not for a very long time, because as we've been told, we will let the music speak for itself very, very quickly. But Professor Kay Chalamet and Professor Ted Levan, please come join me. What I would like to do is to speak very, very quickly about what is it that the agency that I have the honor to represent does, and why subjects and domains of development as diverse as architecture, museum development, music, or conservation of historic cities find themselves parts and programs of a single agency. For those of you who do not know the Aga Khan Development Network, it is the one of the largest private development organizations in the world. And when people privately ask me, what is it? What is AKDN? I tend to say it is like UN, but with results. And as Hashim mentioned, I am a former UN staff member, so I actually have the right to say that because I've experienced that. It's very important in the beginning of your career to understand how not to work. And that's what I did in my first 3 years in the UN. Wonderful initiatives, but so much waste of time and money that I'm very happy to be in the place where I can see the results of our work. AKDN, the Aga Khan Development Network, stands on 3 solid pillars, and those pillars are economic development, social development, and cultural development. And the way in which we crucially differ from many development organizations out there is that we give equal importance to all 3 domains. And that is quite rare, because in the developing world, it is the domain of economic development that tends to be most popular and most desired. The domain of social development is usually tolerated, and cultural development is very often neglected or viewed as a permanent burden on somebody else's budget or on somebody's pocket. And through our work, what we strive to prove is that cultural development, when properly looked after and properly invested into, can become a catalyst and a trampoline for the rest of the development of the area, region, or community of beneficiaries that we work with, rather than the opposite, rather than that permanent burden. The Aga Khan Trust for Culture, the organization that I represent, has been in formal existence since the 80s, but the first program of the Aga Khan Trust for Culture, the Aga Khan Award for Architecture, that is very closely associated with the Graduate School of Design, was officially born in the late 70s, and became really the foundation for the organization that is now known as the Trust for Culture. It was very quickly followed by the Historic Cities program that looks at the multi-domain and multi-thread development initiatives centered around a center of historic city, or a project that we tend to call multi-impact or multi-area development projects. And those are first and foremost for the beneficiaries, for the communities that live, reside, or benefit from that area. And it's very important from the very beginning to explain to people who are ultimately to become the owners of that initiative that they really are the driving forces of that project, because so many organizations tend to come in and are viewed as foreigners, as foreign elements, and at some point they leave without really making an impact on the local population, and that very often signifies the beginning of an end of the project. To give you a very small example of what Historic Cities program does, our founder and chairman, His Highness the Aga Khan, for many, many years wanted to make a mark or a donation or a gift to the historic city of Cairo, which personally and historically is very relevant to his personal life and his work. And despite many efforts to persuade him to invest in yet another school or education center or hospital, his preference went towards creating a green lung for one of the most polluted cities on this planet. Finding the only way to find a space in the center of historic Cairo, a city that was built for, I think, about 5 or 6 million people and now houses over 22 million people. The only way to find a space to be developed was to locate a dump, an industrial dump, which stretched over 30 hectares. What is that, an acre?
60 acres.
60 acres, there you go. The first, a lot of my colleagues who are in this room were there at the very beginning of the project. So the first few years of the project was very much cleaning out of the space. And in the process of cleaning out, the historic Ayyub wall of Cairo was discovered in the in that area. So the project became two-level immediately. It was the building of the park and the restoration of the wall. And then the historic community that surrounds that area that is over 650,000 people, was very quickly incorporated into the development process. So people were trained and then employed for everything from horticultural development to handicraft to design work and all sorts of labors. But basically, the project really became the project of the community and is now one of the largest surplus-making enterprises in not only Egypt, but the Middle East in general. And the recent events in Egypt, which are not always positive, were a great proof to us that the population of the area truly felt that the area belonged to them. So there wasn't a single incident of looting or fire or invasion, but people protected this huge park that has now become a cultural center that is surrounded by schools for children, music schools, and community development centers and healthcare units for women, which are all parts of the work that involve different agencies of our organization. But that really became their home and the place that they invest in to protect and devote their time and their admiration to. The music initiative is one of the youngest undertakings of the Aga Khan Trust for Culture. It was born simultaneously on different levels. One incident was us as an organization making a commitment to the region of Central Asia, which was coming into an era of independence after many years of existing under the Soviet law and Soviet rule, or under the rule of the Taliban, in case, which was the case with Afghanistan. And while it was very it was very easy for us to define which areas of social and economic development to invest into in those areas, cultural development was very tricky one to identify, and it became quite clear that it was the domain of traditional music and traditional arts that needed most attention. At the same time, we were making our mark in North America and joining in with a person many of you will recognize, was a famous cello player, Yo-Yo Ma, who was at that point creating the Silk Road Ensemble. The Silk Road Ensemble that was uniting artists from the historic Silk Route and missing the heart of it, Afghanistan and Central Asia. And our role was not only to ensure the presence of the artists from that region, but also to make sure that the repertoire of the ensemble featured newly developed works from the composers from the region. And that initiative, as beautiful as it sounds, failed quite spectacularly. And it took us a while to understand why. And it became clear that when the composers from Iran or China or India who joined Yo-Yo Ma on stage and in the recording studio and were able to create new pieces based on their traditional music and art very easily, it was impossible for the Afghan or Kazakh or Kyrgyz or Tajik musicians to do that, because their traditional music was very much tampered with, and that culture, that culture of connection that unites the generation of artists from the Silk Road region was very much disrupted. So the very foundation of the identity of the populations was dented. And the first action for us to invest into was not into creating new compositions, contemporary compositions developed on traditional music, but we had to invest into restoring that alternative method of traditional education that the area of the Silk Road was always famous for. The music in that particular region, of course, never was a form of entertainment. It was a form in which the history was passed down from one generation to another. That's how traditions were shared through the artistic connections. And it was very tricky coming into the region of which we had very little knowledge, and finding the artists and masters who still had the knowledge and the ability to teach and trust in the outsiders who promised a long-term involvement in their activities. From very modest beginnings in all over Central Asia, from 6 schools in the first year, we have now gone to over 40, and the number of students that benefit from the method of education that we support in Central Asia has now gone over 50,000, if we count the ones in Kazakhstan, yes. We also realized that music education did not come on its own, and the integrated approach to development that we practice throughout the organization had to be implemented and called for in this project as well. So, as well as investing in education, we simultaneously invested in music production, outreach, mentoring, support for new composers, and with it came performance and production. And that's how, very slowly but surely, we became music producers and started sharing our projects and our musical involvement with audiences outside the region, outside the original region in which and for which they were created. Finally, we also understood that you could only support the tradition that much by educating the next generation. But unless that next generation learned how to create new pieces, new contemporary pieces based on that tradition. In other words, create music that was rooted in tradition but in no means limited by it, then we were not doing the tradition a great service. So then we had to leave that region into which we originally came from and expand into all the countries of the Great Silk Route that were always famous for this extraordinary exchange between the artistic communities, architectural communities, scientific communities that eventually pushed the development of the initiatives in all of those domains. Luckily for us, the Historic Cities program was already involved in development and conservation projects in all of the countries into which the music initiative expanded from Central Asia. And that's how our latest project, which we hope to share with you very soon, was born. That, in a nutshell, is the connection between today's project and the organization that I represent. To tell you more about our approach to development, and specifically in the regions that you will not see today, it is a great pleasure to introduce the partner in crime that I've had the pleasure of having for the past 13 years almost, Ted Levan, who wears many hats. One of them is professor of music at Dartmouth College. Another is a cultural developer par excellence, and many others that I will let him speak about.
Thanks,
Ted Levan.
Thanks, Fairouz. I'll be quite brief. A couple of points really to add to what Fairouz has already told you. I had the privilege of being invited to join the Aga Khan Music Initiative as a consultant about 10 years ago. I was also, before that, working with the Silk Road Project that Fairouz mentioned with Yo-Yo Ma. I was the first executive director of that and later served on the board. And before that, starting in the 1970s, I lived in Uzbekistan and studied music there. So I had a long history of exploring the byways of Central Asia. And so for me, it was a wonderful opportunity to have a donor, His Highness the Aga Khan, who got interested in the region of the world where I was working and decided, as Fairouz said, to use music as an instrument of development. Music is not, of course, the first thing that might come to mind as a development instrument. And yet it's been, I think, a very successful one. And I think it's successful partly because of the importance or the way it's able to forge and strengthen identities, community identities, and really build a sense of cohesiveness among people whose identities had been shattered in the Soviet experience. And I think that the schools that Fairouz described that we've started in Central Asia, the performers that we've trained in these schools, the performance groups that have emerged from those, have all had a very strong and really quite profound effect on the cultural identity of Kyrgyz, Kazakhs, Tajiks, Badakhshanis. Those musicians have become leaders, cultural leaders in their communities, and they've really instilled a new vision that I think is rooted in this idea that Fairouz alluded to of a music that's rooted in a sense of place and yet forges global connections. And I think that's really the challenge of working with music in a development context. It's trying to figure out how you really empower local people. We obviously don't tell them what to do. We offer them resources and they can consult with us, but they're the ones who figure out what they want to do and how they're going to build these development strategies. So some of them, in Tajikistan, we support an academy of maqam, maqam being the classical music tradition of much of the Middle East and Central Asia, indigenous classical music tradition. So these guys are revitalizing a tradition that's essentially 1,000 years old, but finding a way to make it meaningful in the conditions of contemporary Tajikistan. In Kyrgyzstan, we support a center that's reviving this master-disciple pedagogy, Ustad Shagird, it's called. Persian words, ustad shagird, master disciple, or master apprentice maybe. And they've trained, literally trained and created a new generation of superb musicians who are now 18, 19, 20, 21 years old. These guys have they have a little center in Bishkek. They're playing three-stringed lutes and jaw harps and ancient shamanic bowed fiddles, kilkiaks. And at the same time, they've got a computer lab. They're all computer literate. They can transcribe music. They arrange old songs. They are all expert recording engineers. They take classes in English because, one friend of mine defined an artist as someone who can paint and knows English. You have to know English these days, I think, if you want to be an international artist. So these guys they're very well, they're being trained to play a role not only in the development of Kyrgyz music, but to represent Kyrgyz culture in an international arena. In Kazakhstan, we support an organization that's created a whole new methodology for teaching about traditional Kazakh music. This as a replacement for what had happened in the Soviet era when everything was essentially Russified and Europeanized, and local music took a back seat. So that, thanks to this organization, Kukul College, they've created a wonderful methodology of teaching kids in Kazakh schools, not just kids identified as musically talented, but everyone. It's sort of the way people of my generation, I don't know whether it's still the case here, learn to play recorders, in second grade, or tonettes. They're learning to play dombras and sing oral epic in Kazakh schools. And as Fairouz mentioned, there are tens of thousands of kids who have gone through these programs. We pay to build instruments of pretty high quality that are given to them to practice on. And this has also created a new sense of identity that's hopefully, it's not just nationalistic, it's on the contrary, it's cosmopolitan. And this is really our goal, is to build a spirit of cosmopolitanism in these countries that are, I would say, threatened by very strong ethno-nationalism coming from political agendas. So the last thing I want to say is that, as Fairouz mentioned, she's been at it, director of the Music Initiative since 2005. You started in what, 2000 with the organization? Right. I've been in it since 2002. And it's still the two of us, I guess, who are the core of it. So this is long-term. It's a long-term commitment, both a long-term institutional commitment and a long-term personal commitment. And what I've learned from this experience is that this is the way to do cultural development work. It's not the sort of thing where you go and you give some grants for a year or 2 years and then move on to a different area. You make a long-term commitment to a region. And after a decade, we're beginning to see some very interesting results, and I think both of us look forward to continuing to do it.
To quote our chairman, he once said, His Highness the Aga Khan was once asked, how do you measure success in whichever project that you're involved in? And he said, you measure it by the fact when your beneficiaries become the masters of the process and you're free to leave. So we're not, unfortunately, at that point yet, but we very much hope that we will be there soon. And we can certainly see the difference between 10 years ago and now. And we were asked by an interviewer recently, how do we measure success of our project? And we agreed that the simple fact that throughout Central Asia and Afghanistan, carrying a rubab or a dombra or a kilkayak or a tanbur has become cool again. And that really was a wonderful measure of success because it was all but unthinkable.
Yeah, it used to be accordions, right?
Exactly, or a violin, and of course those kids, they have parents who had to learn about their own cultural heritage and about their own instrument through conservatory-imposed education, and they had to understand the traditional instrument of the region through an imposed concept that came from the West. So seeing those 15, 17, 19-year-olds carry their instruments with pride and seeing them jam on their instruments is one of those unthinkable elements that when we faced the situation 10 years ago, we hoped to see it, but we didn't quite believe that it was going to come true. So it's truly a pleasure.
I'd like to now introduce my friend and colleague, Professor Kay Chalamet, who's professor of music at Harvard and has carried on a great deal of very deep work that's also connected to these ideas of revitalizing, sustaining, preserving, documenting intangible cultural heritage, expressive culture in a couple of areas that she'll tell you about. Kay.
Thank you. Thanks to both of you. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm not a part of the programs that they are representing and speaking so eloquently about tonight, but I am very much a fellow traveler. And I think that my role tonight is to talk about the relevance of revitalizing tangible and intangible cultural heritage in communities like our own, and the work that we might do as academics, as members of the community, that really will have very similar import and can have an impact on the world around us. I think it's long been conventional, and I've written out my comments just to protect you from any overtime, but it's long been conventional to separate the academic musical activities from domains of applied work and social action. And what I'd like to say tonight is that this border is in fact very, very porous. The study of and the engagement with music inevitably leads to many types of interactions and relationships, and to many domains of what I will call social engagement, which really means working with people in their own terms to make a difference in the traditions they transmit. And I would argue that it's almost inevitable while carrying out musical scholarship at home on music and musical life that one becomes part of these communities and the musical processes that one seeks to study. And I want to suggest that scholars like my good colleagues here who are involved in work such as the Aga Khan Music Initiative, and in fact Ted Levan does write books and also does a great deal of scholarly work in addition to his work in revitalizing cultural heritage. But there are three ways, and I'd like to make three comments, three domains, point out three domains in which I believe our work is rather similar. And this is work to preserve, to memorialize, and to mediate musical traditions. And let me talk a little bit about my work as a scholar and then give you a case study from one of the Syrian musical traditions. We'll be hearing traditions that draw on Syrian music and the maqam later this evening, and I'd like to make a few comments. So my recordings and interviews that I do as a scholar surely preserve the traditions I study. They're deposited in archives, and these are archives that are not just available to other scholars, but they are repatriated very actively to the communities that we work with. So in this manner, scholarly work documents musical practices and at the same time supports new and perhaps improvisatory initiatives, such as the ensemble we're going to hear in just a few minutes. I've also said that research can memorialize musicians in broader communities. And these are the people with whom all of us work, who share their time and expertise and their musicality. And I think one very rewarding and important part of the work we're all doing is to memorialize these individuals and the groups that they are a part through their presence in our writing and our publications across various media, through recordings, films, videos, internet postings, and even the conventional written word. Musical practices and expertise are memorialized and they're honored according to the desires of the musicians who are involved. This is important work, and I think this is something that you're doing very actively. I think it's something we all aspire to in the academic scene as well. And finally, academic music scholars surely frequently mediate tradition. That is, we present performers in concert, we bring them into our classes, and we aid them in reaching broader publics, both within their own communities and outside them. So I believe that all of us here today on this panel share a commitment to preserving, to memorializing, and mediating musical traditions. And I want to just give you a brief overview of one interesting case study about how this can come to be in our own environment, whether here in Cambridge or in other towns in the United States or in many locales abroad. I think whether as a scholar or an official of a public or private agency, or simply as a concerned cultural activist, we can actually make quite a difference. I'd like to just mention a tradition that I've been involved with as an ethnomusicologist over the 80s and the 90s. And I, along initially with a whole team of my students, then in New York, carried out a project of music research with Syrian Jews who came from Aleppo, Syria. They had migrated nearly a century before. This is a very mobile community, and established a very large community in Brooklyn, New York. And this Brooklyn community, which numbers well over 100,000 at this point, is the largest of many Syrian communities scattered around the world. They're no longer in Syria, which is probably fortunate given the situation today, but they're located in Mexico City, in Manchester, England, in Buenos Aires, in Jerusalem, and many other locales. And despite their separation from their Syrian homeland for a century, they still identify themselves as Arab Jews, and they still perpetuate very actively the musical tradition they brought with them from Aleppo to these different places. And the intent of the Syrian music project that I started, 25 years ago, was to document and record a repertory of some 600 hymns. They were known as pismonim. They are simply songs. They were sung in context ranging from liturgy to rituals held for holidays at home, and to even sung at parties. And these hymns borrow well-known popular Arab melodies, and they set them with newly composed sacred Hebrew text. They are true hybrids, and this was the part of the project that touched on preservation. We recorded hundreds of the songs, and we built an archive for the Syrian Community Center in Brooklyn with the recordings we made, and I've also deposited these recordings in the Archive of World Music at Harvard, so they're available here as well. But the process of preserving these hymns also memorialized the musicians and the history of which they were a part and continue to be a part. So we are able both to document the tradition and pay tribute to the many individuals whose musical activities and compositional processes and dedication help these songs move from the Syrian world worldwide and maintain them today at the center of Syrian Jewish life. And finally, inevitably, we became mediators for this tradition, helping to present it to groups outside the community, and also sometimes we're called upon to explain things about the tradition to those within the communities. And I think that all of these efforts really serve to mediate musical traditions in the process of presenting them in performance and in publications. And there was another unexpected outcome to the projects, and this I think is also in synergy with what you've discussed. It sparked a revival of the tradition and generated an entire new cohort among young members of the Syrian community who are today actively involved in perpetuating this hymn tradition, the Pismon tradition today. So I think any sharp distinction, if we would even believe it today, between the academy and the real world of music and culture and politics beyond, it quickly blurs as one works with musicians and the traditions they transmit, whether in Central Asia or in Cambridge or New York. Syrian Jews have been instrumental in sounding Arab music wherever they are, imprinting their music on the urban areas in which they live, and then using it to sustain contacts with the homeland now lost to them. I'd like to show in one image, since we are in a school of design and architecture, and this is the logo of the Syrian Jewish Community Center in Brooklyn, New York, on Ocean Parkway in Brooklyn, just a a nice stop on the F train on its way to Coney Island. But this is the logo they use. You have the skyscrapers of Manhattan on the left. You have the Brooklyn Bridge, of course, and then you have Brooklyn with imaginary Middle Eastern houses. This is a modern American community, a merchant community, increasingly in the professions, but they perceive and conceive their imprint on the landscape as reflecting the Middle East from which they came. And I think that the singing of the Syrian Jewish Pizmonim also provides rather poignant evidence of the manner in which musical sharing can continue to transcend deepest political divides. And it lends us at least a tiny bit of hope that the future will make room for new musical collaborations, for more peoples that consider themselves part of both Arab and Jewish traditions across religious, ethnic, and national boundaries in the Middle East. Thank you.
Unexpected outcomes is a very nice phrase. I think if we had to write a story of our work, unexpected outcomes would be a very good subtitle, if not the main title. Which brings me to an expected outcome, and hopefully an expected outcome would be you enjoying what is to come very, very soon. One of the joys of expanding the music initiative into the areas of the Silk Route and witnessing and in some ways helping revive this century-old exchange between the artists and artistic communities that historically always used to be connected to each other, but about 100 years ago lost that connection, was, to me personally, one of the joys of doing this was coming back to the region of my childhood, the Middle East. And while I've always had and will always have great admiration to the classical expressions of the music from the region, I couldn't help but wonder why the contemporary expressions of the music were very often limited to variations within a given format and very rarely went beyond. And while expanding music initiative and artists on our roster, we went from Afghan to Central Asian to Malian to Pakistani to Indian, and inevitably the questions about presenting new contemporary music from the Middle East and Arab artists started. And we were very hesitant. I was very hesitant for a long time because for some reason that standard format, even though I wasn't satisfied with it, was still very much in my head, and it always involved a great voice surrounded by virtuosic strings. So whichever initiatives we tried to undertake, they did not somehow come to fruition until I met 5 people that will replace us on stage very soon. And once those 5 people came together, first in my head and then in real life, everything worked out. Those 5 composers represent the new generation of composers, artists, and performers from the Middle East. They perform very often on the instruments that are not native to their land. They are truly, fully conversant in their own tradition, but in no ways limited by it. And they're able to communicate the ancient art and the richness of their tradition and make it accessible to the audiences both back home and outside their regions. I will let the music speak for itself. And in that spirit, I would like to ask my colleagues back there to start the introductory film that will introduce you one by one to the musicians who will come on stage very soon, and also introduce you to the process that brought us all together. The process that started with the word no, because their first reaction to my suggestion of putting these instruments and these musicians together was not really. So this little film will show you how we went from not possible.
No to yes.
From not possible to what's to come. Thank you.
Thank you.
thank you very much for being here with us tonight. It's a great pleasure to be actually having our US debut at Harvard tonight. This is the third concert actually for this project. We started with 2 concerts in France last week. And this is the first concert, well, quasi-concert, I guess, in a series of concerts that will include tomorrow DC and then New York, and then finishing with two residencies at Dartmouth and at Brandeis universities. The first composition we played was a beautiful piece in the form of Samai by Jasser Haj Youssef, and we're going to continue with another piece of his called Phrygia. That was Asia by Basir Rajoub. We're going to continue with another piece of his called Turquoise. Thank you very much. That was one of my pieces titled Dream. And thank you, thank you. And before we play, we're gonna play one more for you. I mean, had we printed a program, this would be the official last piece, but we always have more if you guys need more. But before we do so, let me introduce the group. Basir Rajoub on the traditional Syrian instrument, the saxophone. Khalid Yassin on percussion. Basil is from Syria, Khalid is from Lebanon, Firas Shahristan on Kanun from Syria also. The Tunisian Jasser Haj Youssef, violin and viola d'amour. My name is Kinan Azmi on the clarinet, also from Syria. Thank you very much, Harvard, for having us, and thank you, Aga Khan, for making this project reality. And we're gonna do a little gear shift and play one last tune for you, titled Wedding. This is inspired by the moods in parties, in wedding parties that you find in the northeastern part of Syria. So these parties are always loud and never predictable, actually. So here it is, Wedding.
Please come and join us at Brandeis University on the 28th of February, where they've developed a total of 17 pieces for this program. So we're only able to share a fraction of that with you today. So please come and join us. Everything is on our website, all the tour dates and all the details of the program.
What's your website?
There is Harvard website, there is akdn.org, there is a website for Brandeis and Dartmouth College. We are all over the web. Type us into Vimeo, into YouTube, into Facebook, and you'll find us. My very, very, very heartfelt thanks to all 5 of you tonight. They fought jet lag, they fought visa regulations, they fought all sorts of things to be here with you tonight. Kenan Azmi was performing in Kaslik outside Beirut last night. He then took a car, drove to Beirut, took a flight from Beirut to Paris, then from Paris to London, then from London to Logan, and then drove to Cambridge. So honestly, that's dedication. They all need to stay awake for at least one more piece. So come on, let's say thank you.
you.